Welcome to my first ever video. I know you read the thumbnail, so let's get straight into it. After you find your reference, you're going to want to download and save it to your photos. After you do this, you're going to use the drawing tool so that you can actually draw on the photo. The key elements you want to try to identify is shapes, distances between certain features, overall anything that's going to help you in the sketching process, because you will be using this while you're drawing. As somebody who has actually went to art school, this method is usually what they teach you. I find it to be the most effective as well, which is why I'm recommending it to you guys. So they have other methods like the grid method as shown. Reason I don't particularly agree with it is because it doesn't necessarily teach you anything. Grid method isn't a very user-friendly method for beginner artists, because unlike the photos here, they don't actually teach you anything about proportions. Again, as you are sketching over your original picture, want to make sure you're identifying shapes. As you become a little bit more advanced, you soon won't need to do this process. You will start to see the shapes visually in your mind. This is a great way to just get it down on paper so that you can visualize it. So once you're done, you're going to want to go to whatever screen you're using and you're gonna put it side by side. If you're a traditional artist, you can print out the paper. That's how I was taught when I was in art school. You'll just do the exact same thing. You'll have your painting and then your reference right beside it. And all you're gonna do is mimic the exact same thing that you have on your paper onto, your painting. Well, in this case, your iPad. This process might take long, but after you're done, you wanna make sure that all the proportions are right. When I'm in my sketching process, I usually use a light color just so that when I start applying the base of the skin, it's not super vibrant. I usually use the general color of the entire reference. So as you can see, this reference is very orangey, so I used an orange base. After I added another layer and I started doing the outlining, make sure in these first couple processes you're actually doing multiple layers, because the majority of your sketching is going to be deleted. You don't want that annoying base underneath your painting. So as I'm outlining, I'm also thinking, okay, well, what things do I need to change if I didn't do something correctly in the first process? These are simply things you should be thinking about as well, and you should always be referencing your reference and always looking at it and seeing what you can change or alter. And oops, yeah, it gets a little scary when you remove the first layer. So for traditional artists and for, digital artists, always want to start with a larger brush. Otherwise, with the skinny brush, you can get a little bit too focused on the details and you can start getting stressed out. So just identify the light values and the dark values and just start placing it down. Doesn't need to be perfect right now. You're just trying to get that base color down. And as those previous pictures shown, this is not a method that only I teach. All your art teachers are going to tell you to do the exact same thing. Well, if they're good, they're going to give you a thicker brush to use in your first process. You can see that I'm just right now identifying the light points and the dark points, not really necessarily focusing on the midtones, because again, that's not my focus right now. Sometimes artists just get too focused on, the details, it doesn't look good in those first stages. It almost never does, so don't worry. Also, I would like to add, make sure you always pick a reference that has good lighting. If you're looking on Pinterest or whatever platform, make sure that you can identify the dark and the light parts of your reference. But if you're still having trouble identifying your lights and your darks, I would highly recommend actually changing your reference to black and white, which you can do in your camera roll. Because sometimes when photos are in black and white, it's just easier to see, okay, this is a darker black or this is a lighter color, and it'll just make the process easier for you. That's something I kind of had to learn the hard way. So as you can see, I'm starting to add a little bit more color, and I'm trying to make it so she doesn't look like she's dead. And I'm really incorporating the oranges. Sometimes people are scared to add like a very vibrant color. In the end, the vibrant color is what makes the painting look amazing. However, in these first stages, you want to make sure your opacity is really low and very subtle. Sometimes another thing that can happen is you just start adding too much color. If you have that problem, stick to 4 colors in your palette. Identify the most used colors in your reference and just stick to those. So in this case, it would probably be like that peachy color, pink, orange, and probably brown. You would just stick with that because otherwise you just start getting overwhelmed. So you might have seen this image before. This does not simply apply to balls. This also applies to the face because the nose is farther outward than, any other place on the body. It is going to create a cast shadow as you see in the ball picture. This is why most art classes will start off with just identifying like a ball, and then you'll probably move on to a still life. Usually the face is the last thing that you do because all of those skills that you learn are going to be turned into the face, and that still applies. Now, as you can see, I'm heavily blending. Do not recommend this when you are on a later stage because if you do this, your colors will look very muddy. It's only the fact that this is my first blend, so I kind of went ham on it. But once you get to a further stage, you want to make sure you're only blending between the two separation of colors. So if you have one side that's super dark and one side that's super light, you're only gonna blend on that line. Too often I see that people just go blend crazy, then it looks like their entire painting is just airbrushed. I love drawing noses, and the great thing is that noses usually have a lot of color. As you can see, for the half tone of the nose, I actually use burgundy. This is because it's a little bit more of an unharsh color, because if I were to use brown, it can kind of make the face look dead. The same thing applies for the coloration. Don't you just love when Google proves you right? Anyway, another thing that I have not tried but I found to be effective is actually making your reference super pixelated, because then there will be a very defined line of where the light parts and the dark parts of the face will be. This is of course something you can use if you're just having problems identifying shapes. But of course, if that's not a concern to you, then don't even worry about it. Just keep it in the back of your mind. So as a content creator, I always kind of get the same questions, which is how can I draw like you? How can I get like this? How can I get like that? And I always encourage people to understand that your goal should not be to draw just like another artist that you know. Your goal should be to elevate your own style. And I know at times people can get a little bit disappointed when I say this, but the reality is the only way you can get better is through practice. There's no secret sauce, only tips that can help you along the way. So make sure you're attentive if you actually want to, try to get better. And of course, you're always going to make mistakes. Like right here, you can see that I feel like I made the colors right here a little bit too dark, so I went in with a lighter opaque color of kind of like a gray to kind of fix it. When you get to a certain level, you start to realize that you're not really perfecting anything, you're just noticing your mistakes and avoiding them. So throughout the process, you're just like, oh, this is off, let me fix it. This is off, let me fix it. That's the important thing to understand about being an artist. Just going to be fixing little mistakes the whole way, and that's okay. Well, as you can see, I start to blend only between those lines of color. I'm not blending as much as I was last time. I'm just staying and blending in that same line of color, especially in the nose and the eyes area where you want it to look a little bit more softer. So this is for my traditional artist, which is where I started, of course, and I still mainly do traditional art. If you're drawing portraits, I would heavily advise you to do oil paint. And I know you might say, well, acrylic paint dries faster. I don't have to wait, because I used to be the exact same way. But when it comes to drawing faces, you really want to take your time. And sometimes acrylic paint just works way too fast and it gets harder to blend and go back and render. So if you're doing a realistic portrait, most of the time you want to go for an oil-based paint. This is when it starts getting fun. I'm adding in all the detail. I'm zooming into my reference and zooming into my drawing, and I'm just adding as much detail and highlights as possible. Personally, I like a little bit of shine in my eyes, so I kind of went ham with the highlights in the eyes. Of course, you don't have to do that. It's just my personal style. And remember, just because you're drawing realistically, it doesn't mean you can't add a little bit of spice to your painting. Like, come on now. Let loose and have fun. You can see I started adding highlights. She had very glass skin. So I made sure I incorporated that. Oh, and a very important thing to know about the lips: never use white to lighten a color. If you have a red lip, use orange instead, a lighter orange, because what's gonna happen if you add pink to red is it's just gonna turn pink, obviously. So instead, you can use white for the final highlights. When mixing colors, use orange because it'll make it a lighter version of red, especially for this reference. This is an amazing example of that because this reference is very orange based. And don't be shy to go dark with the lips as well, because usually the inner corner of the lips are the darkest part. Why'd I say part like that? Are the darkest part of the entire face. That and the nostrils. So let's move on to the hair. Don't be scared, guys. So for the hair, it's very similar to the first part of your face. See how it started with very, very thick, just globs of color? And I would recommend just picking 4 colors, sticking to that, and you're gonna start with larger shapes, and then you're gonna blend, then you're gonna refine, as you can see in the picture here on the screen. It's kind of funny to me when people ask me, how do I draw hair? How do I draw this? Everything on the face, matter of fact, anything possible to draw, will follow the same rubric. You start with large shapes and then you define. It will always be the same. That's why I say just bite the bullet, learn the basics of drawing, and then there's not going to be anything that you can't draw without a reference. But your goal is to figure out what you like the best. So maybe you might do the hair a little bit differently, but generally that will stay the same always. And I can do more in-depth tutorials on specific things, but if you don't want to wait for another long video, I do have hundreds and hundreds of YouTube shorts and TikToks that go in depth on specific things like the eyes or the nose or the lips or the hair. I can't even think about something that I have not done yet. And of course, all my social media platforms will be down in my description. Guys, this is my first video. Relax. I'm trying. But anyway, now you can see I start adding in my highlights, which is like kind of like a yellow color, and it starts coming out really, really pretty. This is my favorite part because everything just starts getting put together. I can add like random pieces of hair. It just makes everything look more and more realistic, and I start getting happy inside. And I'm not even gonna lie, at this time, I'm still finding things that I could have done better. Like, I feel like the hair on, what is that? Hold on, give me a second. I don't know my left from right. The right side. The hair on the right side, I feel like is a little flat. It could be higher. And some artists even say that a painting is never done because there's never something you can't go back and fix, which I think I'm gonna have to agree. As you can see, I'm just adding finishing touches and I'm almost done. And I just want to thank you guys so much for watching. I know it's my first video. I'm a little bit rocky, but please do consider following. I have many great ideas to come, and like this video just to show some support. And all my social media platforms will be down in the description. Make sure you're in tune with that. If you want to let me know that you made it this far in the video, comment down an unpopular opinion you have about art. Or if you don't have one, you can simply comment down below your least favorite thing to draw. Anyway, thank you so much for tuning in, and make sure you drink enough water and stay blessed.